So let's say you've got 300 bucks to spend on a new GPU. Nvidia want you to buy this one right here, their new RTX 4060. But instead, you might want to check this one out, their old 3070. There is a mountain of these 3070s out there, and you take a quick look on eBay, these things are going for under 300 bucks. So same price, but very different. On one hand, you have a newer GPU running on a more refined architecture with a better power efficiency. I mean, somehow this thing only pulls 115 watts. But on the other hand, you have what was a $500 to $600 GPU when it first launched 3 years ago, with way more CUDA cores and compute power and a way higher memory bandwidth. But again, at the same price. So I put them both on the test bench along with a Ryzen 5800X 3D and some fast memory, and ran them both through 12 games at 1440p at high to max settings. And the differences were pretty shocking. At the low end, you're looking at a 20% difference in frame rate in favor of the RTX 3070. So Shadow of the Tomb Raider, Call of Duty, Forza Horizon, 20% is a noticeable improvement in smoothness. Most games though actually fall closer to that 30% mark, which is pretty nuts. Now, if you remember, the 3060 was about equal to the 2070, but now we have the 4060, and it's disappointingly not even close to the 3070. But it actually gets worse. At the top end, I saw gains around 35% for the 3070, and I mean, there are plenty of instances where the 4070 couldn't maintain a 60 FPS average, but the 3070 could do 75 plus. There is one area though where the 4060 does clearly beat the old 3070, and that's when we're talking about performance per watt. And of course, we're comparing silicon here, which is over 3 years apart. The 4060 is a lot more advanced, and yeah, the power efficiency here is super impressive. But I'd argue that for this comparison, it doesn't actually matter. Like, do you really care about performance per watt when you're losing like 30% in average frame rate? Personally, I do not. And let's not pretend that the 3070 is like a power hog, because the TDP here is only 220 watts. You can run this thing on a dual 8-pin power connector, like a 500 to 600 watt power supply. And there are plenty of models out there that are like this, 2 slots, pretty small and ITX friendly. And there are some other slight differences too. I mean, the frame generation and the AV1 encoder support are pretty cool, but again, when the raw rendering performance is like 30% slower, this stuff shouldn't change your mind. Now, on the AMD side of things, it's actually a very similar story. AMD came out with the RX 7600. This is 270 bucks, and the performance is pretty close to the RTX 4060. But again, you can look at the previous generation, get the RX 6750 XT for example, and get way more performance for the money. And funnily enough, the old card comes out to about 30% faster versus the 7600. And again, just a quick look on eBay, you can find plenty of these cards going for like 300 bucks. So look, if that's what you're spending on a GPU right now, there is no way I'd recommend getting a 4060 or a 7600. Now, between the 3070 and the 6750 XT, the 3070 does push out a few more frames. It's about 7% faster on average here, but the AMD card does have more video memory, 12 gigabytes versus 8 on the 3070. So if you play games with really high-res textures, or if that's something that interests you in the future, definitely keep that in mind. Power consumption is a bit lower on the 3070 though, and it's also a much more usable card for creator workflows. So yeah, a few things to weigh up there depending on what you're after. Now, of course, there is always a risk of buying used hardware. Like, you have no idea what the card has been through up until that point, and we are kind of getting to that 3-year period where the warranty does expire for these graphics cards as well, which is really important to keep in mind. And look, if we were comparing a difference of like 10% between the old stuff and the new stuff, then yeah, maybe just get the new stuff. You've got the warranty, you've got the better power efficiency, and you don't have to worry about, what the previous owner did with it. But we're talking about a difference of 30%. Like, 30% is absolutely huge. So that would be like an acceptable leap between entire GPU generations. Like, imagine an RTX 5060 comes out and it's 30% faster than the 4060 at the same price. I mean, it would be really, really impressive. So look, if the card works, it's not caked with dust, and all the fans still work, you are getting a really solid deal. I mean, it's not like these GPUs break easily, you can't overclock them that aggressively, and with a power limit of around 220 watts, it's not like the GPU has been cooking itself and running super hot. But yeah, that's pretty much it. A quick public service announcement, I guess. Don't get the 4060 or the 7600. You're much better off with the old stuff instead.